Hey, everybody, it's Renee Witterstaetter from Eva Inc. Publishing, Pros and Cons Celebrity Booking, Marvel editor on She-Hulk, and you are listening to the Marvel Card Collectors Podcast. Enjoy.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Taylor, and you are listening to the Marvel Card Collectors Podcast, your weekly digest of hobby goodness, brought to you by the Marvel Cards Fan Collective, an awesome community of card collectors and creators. You can find our two groups on Facebook, details of which are at the end of this podcast, so come check us out. With me, as always, is my co-pilot on all things Marvel cards. Here's physical proof, as if any were needed, that we truly are living in a Marvel age of wonders. It's Norrin Rad.
That was real. Yes, that is lovely. Nice. Yeah. My ego is like bursting at the seams. This is crazy. This is too much for me.
Well, that's kind of the idea. I mean, these always used to be, Renee, just so you know, I always, every week that changes. And I always used to fluff up his ego. But for the last few months, I've just been throwing in like sly little.
It's been dark times.
It's a great radio voice that you have. Yes.
Yeah. So I had to rent this place out. I'm not doing too well from it. So usually brown bags for me. But
so
it's okay.
I thought I'd lift it again.
It's nice. I feel like I can re-enter society. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good. We do have a guest this week, folks. I will properly introduce you in a moment, Renee, as best as I can. But before we get into it, we did very briefly talk about the fact that, Renee, you were supposed to be in London this weekend.
I was supposed to be in the UK.
In the UK, right.
Yes.
Okay.
For a show, and it was sadly canceled. So I would have already been in the UK, and I would have certainly taken the train to London to pay my respects. During this time, I was a big admirer of the Queen.
Yeah, you and millions of others in terms of the going to London and the admirer.
I mean, what an amazing woman and an amazing role model. I think for all of us, for her sense of duty.
Absolutely. It's such a weird experience at the moment. It's kind of what I wanted to touch on it. And this episode will be out on Thursday. So we'll still be in the official mourning period. So this will be relatively fresh to people. But I was reading the newspaper this morning, and there was a stat in there that I found fascinating. I think 91% of people living in the UK, born in the UK, were born during the Queen's reign, Queen Elizabeth II.
That is amazing.
Wow.
She's been on the throne for so long.
But she's certainly, obviously, the only queen that we have ever known. And I know she was the queen of the United Kingdom, but, we also in different parts of the world felt like she was our queen too. She was such a symbol of how to reinvent yourself, how to stay relevant, how to do it with dignity and style, and maintain also some sense of personal life, living such a very public life.
Yeah.
And being in the industry I am in, on some minor degree, certainly not like Her Majesty, but we deal with that a little bit too. You balance your personal life with your role as, a public figure or a creator. And what do you share and what do you not share? You always want to keep something for yourself that's just for you.
Yeah.
And imagine the scale that she had to do that on.
Yeah.
And I have always just admired her grace and her dignity.
Yeah.
And her commitment to doing right and serving her people. We may never see her like again. To think about the changes that happened in her lifetime. When she became queen, people were, it was the telegraph age.
Oh,
and now we are in this multimedia internet age. It's just to imagine. I have an aunt who's 96, and I talk to her about this frequently. Just the changes that have happened in this short period of time.
Yeah.
And to be witness to that.
Yeah.
I wish the Queen in some ways was someone who would have, wrote a book about this, because just the things she has seen and the people she knew. It's like ancient history to us, but to her, it was her life.
Yeah. There's so many wonderful stories. I mean, I don't know. Over here, it's everything at the moment. Everything's just stopped because we are 48 hours as we record since she passed. So it's absolutely wall to wall at the moment, and it's like nothing else is going on. There's no sport this weekend. Loads of public events being cancelled. London is going to be full within a few days.
Oh yes.
Once she lies in state, it's going to be.
Sure.
I did read an interesting thing because one of our clients, I work for a marketing agency, and one of our clients has got a PR agency, and they sent round the official kind of PR guidance that comes out from the government and from the palace. And it was updated last year to take into account as to what would happen over the 10 days of mourning leading up to a funeral. Right. And the worst case scenario is that London literally gets too full. Because in 1952, and this is obviously, London was a lot smaller then. There were a lot fewer people around, and travel wasn't necessarily as easy. 305,000 people queued to see the Queen's father's coffin as it was lying in state. So think about how many that could be this time, because there's going to be a 4-day period. It's like literally 23 out of 24 hours a day where people can go and see the coffin. It's going to be crazy.
Well, I'm sure people will be queuing up for hours.
Yeah.
I'm fighting the urge to get on a plane. I'm in New York. I can get to London as easily as I can get to California.
Yeah.
And part of me is like, oh, I should go. But then the logistics of what you're saying too, there are going to be hundreds of thousands of people there.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. But, deservedly so.
Deservedly so, yes. It was so sudden. I think that the shock of how sudden it was is also, it's not like we did not expect that she would pass sometime.
No.
But not so sudden. I mean, just a day before she was talking to the new prime minister.
Yeah,
that's
15.
Right.
Yeah,
it is crazy. My daughter's just turned 7, and we told her, and even she was upset because she was, because she was like, it's the Queen, it's like a figurehead for her. But then,
my condolences to all of you there. My thoughts are with you all.
Well, we watched the. I showed my daughter this morning. I showed her now King Charles III, his televised address last night, and we watched it. And then someone sent me the most incredible meme. It was a picture of Prince Charles as he was then holding a guitar.
I saw that today.
And the slogan was, the artist formerly known as Prince.
Yes.
Which just made me laugh.
That's probably why I made my Prince joke before we got on camera.
Yeah, probably. Anyway, Renee, half the people have probably figured out who you are. Half of them probably haven't. So I was grappling with how to introduce you. We go 2 routes with guests. We either ask them to introduce themselves, or if we know them well enough, we look, we write something up. Now,
give it a go.
I'm hoping that you're going to allow me to cheat, because in kind of, I've been aware of your kind of work from, Marvel Age and various other books. And not so much what you've done since then. Obviously, I've read up on that, and there's so much there. I'm going to cheat a little bit, if you don't mind, and read the official blurb that was on the Boston Fan Expo website, because I'm assuming this is official copy that probably.
Well, let's hope it's accurate. I didn't even read it, so.
You know what? Let's dive in. So now I'm going to try and do your surname, which we practiced before I was on air, but I'll give it a go. Renee Witterstaetter.
Yes.
Began the comic phase of her career working on such titles as Guardians of the Galaxy, Thanos Quest, Superman, Silver Surfer. No one's doing it.
Love that.
Conan the Barbarian, The Punisher, Special Projects, and Conan Saga, then going on to spearhead the reintroduction of She-Hulk at Marvel as well as part of that legendary run. Can we just pause a moment? Have you watched any of the MCU? Do you watch the MCU stuff?
Well, yes, I do. With my schedule, I don't often do it in a timely manner.
Yeah.
And I admit, much to my chagrin, I have not watched She-Hulk yet. Although I hear that it's very good.
I'm 2 episodes in, and it is so good.
It's fantastic.
I can't wait.
It's so refreshing. It's light. It's well executed. well paced. I love it, and you know what I love about it as well. And this isn't spoilers, but they usually put the opening credits at the end on the Marvel shows. There's quite a long period of stuff, and there's loads of kind of. It's got a comic art effect as if the images are being drawn on the screen, and they reference a lot of the iconic images that have been used on She-Hulk books.
Yeah, so they're like the courtroom drawings throughout the episode,
nice.
And then at the end they show the courtroom drawings as if they're recapping the show, but also what happened to things in the plot line that you weren't kind of aware of during the show. So you kind of see like a little bit of where loose threads went and nice little updates to where the next episode is going. It's done well, and the actors.
Well, I would definitely watch it. I like to joke that I'm boycotting though, because my invitation to the premiere was somehow lost in the mail.
Now this is
that's a crime.
They invited other people from Marvel that didn't even work on the book, but sadly,
that's a crime.
Myself.
Right.
That's a crime.
We're going to start.
And I am a character in the book, guys.
Yeah. I know. Well, yeah, exactly. We've got 4,000 members in our group, so we'll see if we can get them all rustled up, because there's
we're going to start a petition
written straight away.
Please rustle.
Yeah. Okay. We'll do that. Okay. Everyone listening. Yeah. I wish we had 4,000 listeners to this podcast, but we can dream. But we've got 4,000 people in the group. You know. Right. Okay. Here we go. So the life of Renee continues. I'm loving this. We should just do this in future episodes now, and we should just
I'm in
people's bios back to them and just comment on it. She then
what if that's not me? I'm the wrong person.
Renee then moved to Topps Comics, where she was the editor on the X-Files, Jurassic Park, Xena, and Hercules, and is the co-creator with Jackie Chan and artist Michael Golden, who was with you at the con the other month.
Yes.
Of the successful series Spartan X, which will be made into a trade paperback featuring new material. Oh, I'll pick that up. She is also the colorist on hundreds of comics, from the Avengers to Spider-Man to Captain America to Jurassic Park, among many, many others. Punctuation isn't your friend in that one. She is the writer of Nick Cardy, The Artist at War, Excess, The Art of Michael Golden, Kerry and the Scary Things. Is that a children's book?
It is.
It is. It is.
Cool.
I think I've seen that. My daughter might even have had it at a school library, because I've definitely seen it around. Dying for Action, the life and film of Jackie Chan, and more. She is the president of Little Eva Inc. Publishing and Eva Inc. Artist Group, which I really want to talk about, which represents artists and writers in comics, storyboards, fine art, painting, and more. There's 3 more paragraphs here, but I'm going to pause. I'm going to come back to it, because
that's almost accurate. Jackie was the consultant on Spartan X. He wasn't the co-creator.
All right. Okay.
Michael Golden and I created, so I'll have to have that corrected.
Yes. Okay.
Although, Jackie is and was a friend of mine, so he was very much someone that I really went to for accuracy in the book. And it was certainly inspired by Hong Kong movies, Jackie's included.
Yeah.
I think the rest of that is fairly accurate. I think it left out pros and cons celebrity booking. Or is that in the next paragraph?
No, it's not. The next paragraph goes on to talk about you being one of the producers of the Creator Chronicles DVD series with Woodcrest Productions, featuring interviews with this list that's coming up just makes me sit up and beg, with major industry creators such as George Perez, God rest his soul, Bill Sienkiewicz, Michael Golden, Joe Jusko, Matt Wagner, Joe Sinnott, and many more.
Oh, yes. Great list of people.
Other projects include the books Michael Golden, Dangerous Curves, Santa Confidential with Hagar the Horrible Artist, Chris Brown, and Mark Texera, Tempest.
Sarah's great.
In her not so abundant free time, she lectures on storytelling, most recently in China and Russia. Wow, you travel.
Quite a bit before the pandemic.
Yeah. I think everyone's the same. Fishes, dances, travels, and is also curating several major art exhibits. I've lost the power to speak, featuring US and European talent. And that is where it ends. Fishes. That's the one that sticks out. You're a keen fisher lady.
Oh, yes, I am. Quite.
Oh.
I was just fishing this last weekend, but all I caught were blue crabs. No fish at all, but I filled the canoe with blue crabs.
Okay.
And I was only pinched twice.
Right.
Wow. Better than me. That's awesome.
Then I let them go. The fun part was like bringing the canoe up on shore and then trying to get behind each crab and grab it from behind and throw it back in the water.
Yeah.
So they didn't seem to understand that I was trying to help them. And
most wild animals don't. Yep.
They're not the smartest.
Of course, I did abduct them to begin with.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But yes, I love to fish. I like to take pictures of them and then let them go.
Oh, cool.
I am like the alien abductor.
I was just thinking from a crab's point of view.
Plucking them out of their world and examining them and then letting them go back to tell the other fish their stories.
It's real, I swear.
Yeah.
Oh, it's insane. He's lost his mind.
Yeah, given the generational stories passed down from generation to generation about the aliens that do this, you'd think the crabs would have caught on by now. Certainly the lobsters.
Right.
Whereabouts were you? What part of the world were you out fishing in? I
was in Rhode Island. It's the Labor Day weekend is generally the only weekend I take off and do something non-comic book related. Okay. Every other weekend of the year, especially during the busy season, I'm usually at a convention.
Yeah.
Pre-pandemic, and it's getting back to that now because I also, in addition to Eva Artist Group, I have pros and cons celebrity booking, and I rep actors and voice actors and media talent through that company. Wow. But I was at a dance event in a Cajun and Zydeco dance event in Rhode Island.
Oh, wow.
I'm also a ballroom dancer.
Oh, that's cool. Wow.
Salsa dancing, Cajun dancing.
Very, very cool.
Like
very cool.
Yeah.
I love
good exercise. You can have fun and get some exercise.
I love all that stuff. Yeah, I used to do all that stuff.
Well?
Yeah. So I'm originally from Miami, Florida. So I did like a bunch of like little things like that. Not anything serious, but it's really cool. I love all that stuff.
Well, if we're ever to show together, we'll have to look for a dance event.
I'm there. That's a promise. I'm in.
You should probably know that Norin is 6'4", so he's
but I'm
a
graceful
tall partner.
Okay. I'm like a dandelion on the dance floor. Okay, I'm just going. Okay, it's gorgeous.
Is that beautiful. A good reference?
Maybe. I don't know. The only flower I could think of. I was like, maybe.
A dandelion.
I do believe it.
We'll go with that as a mental image. That's gonna stick with me for a long time.
I'll live with that.
Actually, while we're mentioning there, because obviously I met you last month for my first ever US con, the Boston Fan Expo, which we touched on in last week's episode. Mm-hmm. And I've been to small ones in the UK before, but never what I consider to be a proper one. And the American ones are, for me, as an Englishman, the proper ones, because 9 times out of 10, there's a lot more of the talent there. Because it's it's on home soil, from the comics and the cards world, and it was just I was only there for that day, and it was just absolutely wonderful. So
one day, wow, whirlwind visit.
Well, no, I was only at the con for one day. I was in the US for 2 weeks, but I'd flown on a Friday night and gone up to join family in New Hampshire the following day. So I just had that one day there, but it was great, and I met some fabulous people. So I know because of what you do, you mentioned it's getting back to normal now. So in a speech quotes in there, in a normal year, what's the kind of number of cons that you'd be hitting? I mean, would it be throughout the year, or is there a season, or is it how does it normally run?
Well, usually the slow months are December and January, and somewhat February. But every other month there are, and even during those months now, there are shows. You used to be able to say, oh, well, in December and January, there will be no shows, but it's not like that anymore.
Okay.
Every other month, there are multiple shows on every weekend.
Wow.
And I can't physically do them all. Some of my artists just go to shows without me and report back, because a lot of times I'll be a guest at another show.
Yeah.
And so it just depends. And I lost count of how many shows I did this year. I have not counted them actually.
Wow.
I just kind of think about the next month of shows and what I have to do, and promoting the talent to make sure they have as many shows as they want to do.
Sure.
So it's just, this year was busy. Last year, we probably did about half the shows that we normally do. This year seems almost like a normal year.
Okay.
Wow.
Most of the conventions aren't doing the mask mandates anymore, for better or worse. I mean, I don't really have an opinion or know what's best to do, but I think a lot of people are trying to get back to some sense of normalcy.
Yeah.
Foreign shows, anything other than domestic shows have not really wildly picked up because of the prices of air tickets, I think. And also maybe promoters not wanting to take the chance on someone coming and having COVID and then not being able to go back to their home country.
Yeah.
But I think that is also slowly changing. The one day show that I was supposed to be doing in the UK, I think they just decided this year they were not going to do it because they couldn't, they weren't confident of the numbers that would be coming out.
Okay.
So
yeah, it's interesting.
And hopefully we'll do it again next year. And I should be in the UK in the spring because Star Wars Celebration is supposed to be over there.
Yes, Easter, I believe.
Right, so I'm very excited about that.
Yeah.
Is it Easter weekend?
I read that online, and I shouldn't believe everything I read online, but someone did say it was going to be Easter. But either way, I think it's April anyway, whenever Easter falls, because it's always moving around.
Yes.
But I'm tempted by that. It just depends on how much money I've got, because nothing's cheap at the moment.
No, this is so true. But anyway,
it's only 2 hours from me.
Yeah, no, it's like Star Wars Celebration is great because it's totally, well, it used to be. I think it's changed a little bit now, that it's owned. A lot of these companies are owned by the same entity now.
Yeah.
It used to be just all Star Wars all the time, all day long, nothing else. And it was just and Star Wars fans are some of the most devoted fans in the world. And if you had anything Star Wars on your table, they will buy it. Wow. And of course, Michael is a very well-known Star Wars artist.
Yes.
Michael Golden. So he always enjoys those shows. Because it's different than the regular Comic Cons, which are now most of them are becoming very much a mix of different pop culture.
Very much.
And the last Star Wars Celebration we had, there was a little bit of that coming in. I think now if you are there, you can have 80% of Star Wars on your table and 20% of other stuff. Okay. So the other stuff is starting to come in a little bit.
Yeah.
Not to get too much into the business aspects of things, but I'm looking forward to coming over there.
Yeah.
I'll be there before.
The business aspects of it, and the one thing we try and do on this podcast when we talk to people who work in the industry is we just try to have a conversation at the end of the day. We don't tend to be too prescriptive or press junkety about it. But what we've tried to do, because we've spoken to a number of people who've created sets, who happen to also, like Bob Budiansky, for example, we had on last year. And he was a fascinating fellow. And we just try to get that sense of the kind of the oral history of the creation of some of the stuff that we dig. So it's always good to get a peek behind the curtain, I guess, from the point of view of a collector and a fan.
You guys talk amongst yourself for a second. I have to turn on my air conditioner.
Yeah, absolutely. I've finished my cup of tea, Norrin. I need another cup of tea. This is not good.
Another cup of tea.
I need another cup of tea. The Queen's
Another
tea.
cup of tea.
I've taken to drinking my tea.
That may be too loud. Is that air conditioner loud?
Sit down and talk. And let's.
I think it's too loud. I'm turning it off.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the background bit.
We don't want you overheating, Renee.
That's okay. I can't find my palm frond.
Oh.
Yeah, the proper cup of tea. I used to work with a British director on commercials when I lived in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very exacting about how I made his tea.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And he could actually tell if I put the tea bag in first
Yes.
or after.
Wow.
And if I put the milk in first or after.
Yes.
And he just like, oh my, no, it had to be exactly the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. English people are exceptionally precise about how tea is made, and there are all sorts of arguments over how much milk, whether the milk goes in first or whether it goes in afterwards. I've taken to for the reference, I have the hot water in first because it allows the tea to infuse, and then I add milk, and I always have quite a lot of milk as well. But I've recently taken to putting oat milk in my tea.
And how's that working?
It's phenomenal. It's like a road to Damascus moment.
Oh, that's so un-British of you using oat milk.
It's I don't know. Is it though? I don't know.
No, I'm just kidding. I do have to warn you though that like when I was working with this British director, I worked with him for several years, but I have a tendency to pick up accents.
Oh, okay.
And start using them without realizing that I am.
I do as well.
If I start talking with a British accent during the interview, I'm not mocking you. It's just something I do.
Right. I can always change my British accent to sound a bit different. I do this all the time on episodes, and no one just rolls his eyes.
Just to throw me off, right?
Yeah, I do this all the time. It's anyway.
Where is he from? What is he doing?
You talk with a Texan accent, and I'll talk with a British accent.
Okay, well, but
now here we go. I'm ready for this.
I'm going to muff that up, so we'll scrap that straight away. No, I lived in London for 2 decades, so I kind of picked up all sorts. But anyway, let's move on. What else was I going to? No, we digress. We're always doing that on this show. It's like like a side quest.
Digressing is fun.
Digressing,
we like it.
Fun. So I want to talk about, if you don't mind, because I know this is a long time. I know this is like 30 years ago. And I remember when we spoke to Bob, he says, I don't know, it was so long ago, I can't really remember. Bless him. But I'm dead curious to know what it was like to work at Marvel in the early 90s when you were there. How long were you working?
I was at Marvel for about 5 years, maybe a little bit longer.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I started off at DC Comics in the Superman office. And then I went to Marvel, and then I went to Topps. Then I was out of comics completely for a number of years working in film production in Los Angeles. And then comics pulled me back in as an agent. And I've been doing that ever since.
Oh, wow. That's cool. That's cool. No, because when I had this moment where when I was reading your thing, and you said you've gone back into agent, it suddenly occurred to me, because we spoke to Greg Hildebrandt the other year, and he's a delightful fella. And Jean, his wife, does that as well. She's like represents artists, and and it just I was just interested that there are these people within the business who have such connections. It is because it is an industry, and it is people are connected to each other, and it is very much all these conventions you go on is a circuit. I'm just fascinated by how that's developed over the years
it's a traveling circus.
Yeah, like an ecosystem. Exactly.
I like that.
Very much so. Yeah,
I like that. That's a good one.
Renee Witterstaetter on tour 2023. Can you imagine the T-shirt on the back with all the venue?
I know we need to do that. Make
that's a good one.
Shirts. Yeah,
we'll do that. No one's good with his art skills. Mind you, you're good with your art skills as well. So I've got here. I had to downsize my comic collection, but it's still behind me. I had to downsize massively because there's simply only so many one person can own. So I have here, if you can, take my background.
I cannot.
No, I'm going to take my background off because it's just terrible. And you're going to get to see my terrible, terrible office, which is unpainted as yet because we only moved.
Oh my gosh, the horror.
Oh, it is. No, I haven't had a chance to do anything to this room yet. It's still
disgusting.
It's disgusting beige.
What is wrong with you?
It's like this. It's like the color beige that's like heavy smoker's handkerchief beige. It's just terrible. Anyway, so let's move on to something much more beautiful. Marvel Age. So Marvel Age, I love. So for those who don't know, Renee, and I know you worked on this magazine because it says so here. What is or was Marvel Age?
Well, Marvel Age was a book where we previewed a lot of the things that were coming up at Marvel. We did spotlights on creators, just talked about all things Marvel. I always looked at Marvel Age as a way to communicate with our community of fans. Just like I approached all the columns I wrote that way as well. This is a way to communicate with people that might be picking up my book so they know a little bit about me. Yeah. So Marvel Age was that. Marvel Age was like, we want you to feel like you're a part of this. This is what's going on. This is who we are. And it was kind of like almost like a fan, as if we had a fan club and this was our book for our fan club.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I love it. It's kind of a comic book about Marvel. That's how I kind of think about it. Because it is, regular comic book size. I remember these.
I think it made people feel like they knew the creator.
Connected.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. It did.
It definitely did.
I mean, we didn't get these on newsstands, as you call them in America, as much in the UK. We'd get a few into newsagents,
sure,
and it would just be potluck as to what would come over. But I do remember grabbing a couple when I was a wee lad, and thinking, wow! And it's just great, and it did actually land exactly as you described it. It kind of made you feel that there was the team, the bullpen as it was called, of creators. I mean, I've got issue 1 here. I think that was 84, and I know it ran to at least 94 because I think the last issue featured Greg and Tim Hildebrandt, and it was a preview of Marvel Masterpieces 94 trading card. So it ran for about 10 years, and some of the issues, there is an earlier issue that has the first. It's actually, because it was published first, it has the first black suit Spider-Man. It was a preview of Secret Wars. So it has some, this is what I love about it. These days, it's common for comics to come out with like director's cuts or have sketchbook areas in the back, in the graphics and things like that. You didn't get that so much in the 80s. And so a lot of that stuff would end up in Marvel Age. So right. That with preview stuff or, whatever it was. And so, the first black suit Spidey, technically, because it was published before Secret Wars 8 or whatever it was in Marvel Age.
I never thought about that.
So a couple of them.
Mention that to Zach because, I bet he hasn't even thought about that either.
Yeah, it's crazy. And there was a brilliant Stanley photo issue as well. And some of them are.
Oh, the photo issues are so much fun.
Photo issues. Well, there's a photo issue from just after this run where you were. So let me back up a step. So I had a look through all these this morning. I had a good look through. I don't have every issue, but I've got maybe half of them. And I was looking through and I noticed your name start to appear in Marvel Age around issue 90 or so, which would have been about 91, 92, as it just in the editorial team. There was a list of, I can't remember how it was listed now. It was, just consulting editors. And there you are. There's about 20 people in there, and there you are in the list. And I was looking through it. And I was going through issue after issue because I'm sure I remember her being a little more high profile than that. And then suddenly, around issue 106, you're the editor.
I took over
of Marvel.
You took over.
And I'm like, she's storming the castle.
That's enough of this, boys.
How does it actually work? So I imagine it's probably not as glamorous as I'm making it.
She's not going to tell you where she buried the bodies, man.
Well, it required a duel.
Some of the photos in here, you can almost see where they buried the bodies. Honestly, it is quite funny because there's so many photo issues. It's great, and there's a photo issue when Midnight Suns was launched about a year later than this one. And it's all the creators of the various books in the Midnight Suns, but they've all taken a photo in some New York graveyard, and it's the most 90s photo shoot ever.
That's awesome.
So great. Yeah, it is.
It's just wonderful. So tell us how do you get what did you do as your kind of role when you were just in that list of editors, and how did you get up to be like the editor with the?
Like I said, it involved a duel. No, honestly, as a contributing editor, that means that I would write articles.
Gotcha.
I would suggest articles. I would be paid for writing those articles, so it was freelance.
Okay.
And when you're an assistant editor at Marvel, which I probably was still an assistant, no, I might have been a full editor by then. But even so, especially when you're an assistant editor at Marvel during that time, you had to do freelance work because the pay was so low that to live in New York City, you had to write columns or do coloring or do whatever you could to make some extra money. Because I think when I was an assistant at DC Comics, my salary was about $18,000 a year to try to live in Manhattan. Yeah. And at Marvel, I think it was about 24. Okay. So still better. But if you could write a letter column and make $50, that's what you did.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And that's also how I started coloring so many books, which I did very much enjoy. But a lot of times you would get books that were very late, and you get a call or someone knocks on your door and says, "Hey, can you color this 24-page comic book overnight?" And I'm like, wow. Okay, sure. And so you're working as an editor from 9 to usually 7, and then go home and color all night. And then drink a bunch of coffee and go back to work the next day. And that was not uncommon. I mean, I really think during that time, a lot of us were doing that.
Yeah.
Because we were living in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And we were younger, and it was a lot easier to stay up all night and then go to work the next day.
Yeah.
And survive on no sleep for 2 or 3 days. Yeah. And sometimes I know some people, I never did this, but some people would have like a coloring party where they would get 3 of their friends to come over and everybody would color the comic book.
Oh my goodness. Well, not just random friends who weren't working at Marvel, but actual.
Oh no, not somebody off the street that has never held a paintbrush. Because we were actually painting those pages.
Yeah.
I don't know if you realize that, but coloring back then, you had a set of Dr. Martin's dyes.
Okay.
And you would take those dyes and you would mix them to get the different colors. And you had to hand paint every single panel of that comic book. And then you had to code each color for the separator.
Yeah.
So it was a much different process of coloring than what they do now. Mm-hmm. I actually still prefer the way the old comics look most of the time, because I think what a lot of people lose track of is that coloring is a storytelling tool. Yes. Just like the art and the inking and the lettering and the writing, all of those things are supposed to propel the story. And if you have coloring that is so muddy that it makes someone stop and go, "What is going on here?" then it's not doing its job. It is no longer a storytelling tool. It is somebody not understanding, in my opinion, the job of coloring. Mm-hmm. So I digressed again. What were we talking about?
No, I mean, that's absolutely. I mean, when you're talking, I mean, we talk about this stuff all the time in what I do at the university over here, talking about color theory. I mean, Technicolor was kind of honed in and perfected by a woman, and she wrote the color theory book on colors. I mean, there's Color Story. There's some beautiful work on Wall-E that was done where they talk about Disney's Color Story and how they go through. It's so, and it's just amazing to see that in comic books too, because what people don't understand, and from my limited experience, is that depth. It really is important when you do coloring, because you have to completely understand the lighting situation, the density of the color. You have to understand, how you create that kind of illusion. It's beautiful. I mean, it's an amazing thing.
And you have to think of it cinematically. A lot of people say this now, but I like to think I was the first, that comic books are like a movie on paper, and you have to think about it cinematically. You have to take your reader through this movie that is on paper and not take them out of that story. So whatever you do to jar them out of that story kind of takes away from that entertainment experience. And, that's the way I look at it. So, I mean, when I was the contributing editor on Marvel Age, that's what I was doing. A lot of times I was coloring stuff in Marvel Age too. Sometimes there was spot coloring.
That's right. Yeah.
And go ahead.
No, I was going to say, because during the issues, there's your reign of Queen Renee, as we will call it, where you're editor, and then you from then onwards, I think from about issue 150 2013 onwards, Steve Saffel is listed as editor, and you've moved to colorist, and there you remain through pretty much the rest of the run until 94.
Who was the editor before me?
Oh, yeah. Now you're asking a question. Hang on a second. It was... no, he's just written the intro on that one. Jim Salicrup I've got on this one, but I think it was someone else before that.
I don't know. I thought I forgot that Steve Saffel was after me.
Yeah, he's after you.
Yeah, that probably means then that my workload, they assigned different books to me at that point because, and then maybe Steve took over. I really don't remember. I'd have to ask Steve what that was.
Yeah.
But I might have become I was a full editor before then. Like Bob said, that was a long time ago. I'm trying to remember exactly how it happened.
And you're doing 20-hour days, drinking coffee and coloring.
Yes.
Yeah, busy.
But I may have relinquished the crown and given it to Steve because I had too many other books to do.
Well, during that brief and glorious period, your opening column where you introduced the issue, which is probably about 8 or 9 issues worth, was Witterstaetter's witticisms.
Yes,
which
that's cool.
You don't want to say when you've had a few shandies. And I just read all those this morning, and I just love the and this is what I like about it. It ties back into your what you were saying earlier about the persona and the relationships that the reader would have with the different people. And it's just, there's very much a warmth and a tone that you had in the way that you wrote your columns. And it was very wonderful and inventive. And Steve afterwards has a different way about him. And, in the same way that Stan's got a very, very, listen to me talking to him with the first name. That's the thing about Stanley. Everyone feels like they know him because he was kind of so everywhere across all the books.
I think he's one of those people, well, especially in our industry, you say Stan, of course, everybody knows who you're talking about. You can call him Stan. I don't think he would have minded.
Oh, bless him.
He was that way. But yes, I tried to write my letter columns as if I were talking to a friend, trying to have the reader know something about me. And I always did try to write about things that were important to me. So I'm glad it came across that way because that's exactly how I meant it to be. And actually my blog, which I haven't posted on in a little bit now, is called Witterstaetter's Witticisms.
What?
Still alive. It's still alive. Brilliant.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
But they changed the formatting of it, and now it's driving me crazy because I go in there to try to post articles and it doesn't let me format them like I used to. So I have to figure out what's going on. That's why I haven't posted much, because it's driving me nuts.
Oh, crazy. What is it? Is it like a WordPress thing or something?
It is. I think it was Blogspot. I don't think it's WordPress.
Oh, okay.
I may have to move it to a different place. But I don't want to lose all my data because I've got years now of articles on there.
Wow.
Okay. We are going to link, by the way, to where everyone can find you online, including in our show notes, and we'll pop it at the end of the show as well. Just simply because I'm curious, and I know maybe you don't get asked about this all the time, but from a perspective of a fan, it's very much a hallowed halls kind of scenario, just thinking about working at Marvel at that time. We kind of perceive it from the outside, through the lens of the books and the work and things like that. So the people there become very much elevated in the eyes of the fans reading them, none more so, I guess, than Stan Lee.
Sure.
But what was it like day to day in terms of working with some of those people? So, obviously you'd have met Stan and probably worked with him during those years.
Oh yes, sure.
Just kind of tell us how it was just to be around some of those people, and how aware were they of how they were kind of perceived? And I'm just curious.
Well, when I first started, when I first moved up to New York, and I had the job at DC as an assistant, I was at DC probably for a little less than 2 years. DC was very corporate, even back then. Very suit and tie, very, it was it was very much a corporate vibe. I don't know how else to explain it.
No.
The staff did not hang out together. Occasionally, maybe you would, but it's not like you would all go to lunch together or all go to dinner or get together or anything like that. People maybe were a little bit older, had families, went home to their families. So that's the way kind of that DC was. It was just kind of a different vibe. Still learned a lot there. Mike Carlin taught me a great deal when I was his assistant, down to how to place balloons in a comic book. I mean, cool. He's a very knowledgeable person, and he did teach me a great deal. But I was offered, I had met Jim Salicrup at a convention in Texas, because before I started working at DC, I was co-chairing a convention in Dallas called the Dallas Fantasy Fair. And it was run by a gentleman named Larry Langford, who's no longer with us. But Larry was really the forerunner of what I consider the modern convention, because he was one of the first people that was bringing in Adam West and Billy Mooney and Stan Lee and I mean really major artists too, Al Williamson and. Oh gosh. I mean, I start thinking about some of the people that I met through that show. He would bring in people like George Takei, really, and like a marvelous guest list. And then he spread to other cities in Texas. And he was really one of the first people doing this. And it was at one of those shows that they were promoting, I think, Craven's Last Hunt, and also promoting the Spider-Man wedding issue.
Oh, no.
So there were a lot of great Marvel people there. That's where I met Mike Zeck. It's where I met Jim Salicrup. It's where I met Tom DeFalco, Steve Saffel, who later I let him sit on my throne. And no, Steve's a great guy. So I met a lot of people through that show. And when a job opening came up at the Silver Surfer art office at Marvel, Jim Salicrup called me and said, well, Craig Anderson is looking for an assistant. If you want to come over here, I think we'd love to have you. So I interviewed with Craig. And I looked at the vibe at Marvel, and while, there was nothing wrong with DC, Marvel at that time was skewing a lot younger. There were a lot more people my own age. I liked the vibe of the books, and I really thought Craig was a really nice guy. And so I took the job, and also the pay was higher. And that may have been a motivating factor.
Small motivator factor.
Yeah. But you notice I said that last, because that was not really, the $6,000 made a difference. I'm not going to lie,
of course.
But it wasn't actually the main thing that I was looking at.
I mean, it was Silver Surfer. That's what we're all talking about, right? Okay.
And Craig also, also being around my friends like Jim, and it turned out to be a decision that I never regretted, because Marvel was such a family at that time. Everyone hung out together. You would have, every Wednesday we used to go to this place called the Abbey Tavern, and that was our get together after work and go have a drink night, and everybody would come. Wow. And we would celebrate each other's birthdays. We would celebrate holidays. And also they would have assistant editor school, which were run by Mark Grunwald. And Mark every week would take the assistant editors and give us classes on how to be a good editor and what to do. And just wanting to, convey his knowledge to the generation that was coming up. I mean, he was a very, very kind man. And I do also think that, and I consider him one of my mentors, and he and Craig Anderson and Jim Salicrup most definitely were big influences on my career. But Mark really made Marvel. I like to make the analogy that he was really the heart and soul of Marvel at that time, because he loved the industry so much. He loved comic books so much. He wanted us all to do good work. And he was a lot of fun. I mean, he was the one that would do all the Halloween parties and organize all the birthday parties. We would you would have Tom DeFalco and the rest of us in the bullpen doing balloon races. Do you know what a balloon race is?
No.
Okay. It's where you have teams. Your team lines up. You have two teams lined up perpendicular to each other. Across the room, you have chairs. And to make it even harder, sometimes you would put a pillow on the chair. And you're given balloons that have not been blown up. So the first person in your row has to blow up that balloon, run to the chair, pop it by sitting on it. Then the next person has to do it. So if you have any trouble popping that balloon, or you don't have the technique down quite right, your team can fall behind, so to speak.
Oh,
so it's.
Oh, it sounds like so much fun.
Yeah. And we even did stupid things like one time, we had this thing where they would never allow you to do things like this today. I'm just saying, life before the internet was so much fun. You could do so many crazy things, and no one ever knew about it. But one of the games we did was, okay, once again, you have a team, and you have one person who is going to be like the pillar, and each team has a roll of Saran wrap, and you have to cover that person in Saran wrap. And whoever runs out of Saran wrap first wins. Now, this is the kind of stuff we did while we were making your comic books, guys. This is what we did.
See, that's the fun translates.
Hats off to you. This is the stuff we want to know. This is brilliant. But you can see it. That's the beautiful thing I like about Marvel Age, which is why I keep going back to it. I can dip into it. And there are issues where you've got photos where you're having parties. There's there seems to be a whole period where invariably there's someone dressed up as Spider-Man, and then there's photos.
Yes.
But it's funny you mentioned the Marvel the assistant editor school. That's mentioned in an issue with photos of it. Yes, it's in an earlier issue than I've got in my hand. They're in the box set, but I saw it this morning and I read about it, and it's fascinating. But in this issue, you've got take a photo tour of the Marvel bullpen. It's like there's a load of kids going around and they're taking photos of it, and they're looking at Terry Kavanagh's office, and they end up in, where are we? Tom, Mark, or Carl. So there's a photo of their office. There's some guy dressed as Spider-Man. There's John Romita Sr. Sitting there in his office, which looks extraordinary. It's just fascinating. And so you did, just hearing about the fact that it was as fun as it looks is.
I enjoy going to work every day.
Good.
Because it wasn't like going to work. It was like going to hang out with my friends. And we got to do, make fun stories. And there was not a day going into Marvel back then that I dreaded. It was just like you were looking forward to it. You were looking forward to seeing the people you worked with.
Yes.
You were looking forward to whatever was going to happen that day. And it was always interesting. It was never boring. Every day it was something different. My degree is in journalism and English. And I think that's one reason that I gravitated towards journalism, because I like to write feature stories. And the reason I did is because I always felt everyone had a story. You just had to find out what that story was.
Yeah.
And that everyone has something interesting about them. And I felt that way about comic books too, is that every time you had a new book to do, you're trying to tell the story of that character. And, you think of them as a real person with real problems and real desires and real goals. And if you approach it that way, you're going to write stories or edit stories that resonate with other people out there that are going through the same thing or feeling the same thing or can get something out of that story. And I think that's one thing I really liked about the Marvel books is I felt many of them back in that day were very human, and you could relate to them. You could have empathy for them. You could go on a journey with them. They weren't infallible. They had some of the same problems that the rest of us have. And having superpowers maybe sometimes helped them, but a lot of times it also hindered them. And they had to figure out how to deal with that. So I always also approached it from a even though my background was in journalism, I found that the skills I learned in journalism also helped me as an editor and later on in film production, because no matter what, you're telling a story.
Yeah.
And stories have to have certain elements. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. You've got to answer those elements in any type of story that you're telling. And you have to try to do it in a way that hasn't been done before, or at least in an interesting way. And so I always liked that challenge. And it's in any type of work I do, I like that challenge of conveying to the audience what it is that I want to tell them. Because it is a communication, it is a type of communication medium, and all of us who are working on those projects are putting a little bit of ourselves into them. So if you have 8 creators working on a project, there's going to be a little bit of each of those creators in that book, and I just always found it enjoyable. And I think that's one reason why I always wanted to connect with the readers and the fans also in the letter columns and in my personal Witterstaetter witticisms column, because I wanted that communication with them. And I go to shows now, and I still have a lot of fans that come up to me and say, I read this article about your father dying, or I read this article about Halloween that you wrote. And I just want you to know that it really meant something to me. It made me think about things in a different way. Yeah. And that's what I was trying to do. So it's nice to know sometimes that what you're trying to do was actually successful, maybe even if only in a minor way, but it's still rewarding.
It's still successful, right? Even if it's in a minor way. It just matters that one person. It's wonderful.
I know it sounds crazy. I'm slightly welling up here because the reason being is because when we made our way, myself and the 2 collectors that I went to the con with, we made our way through and we finally got to the artists area. And I remember going, and there's a line of them down there. There's a line of, because you're all along that one wall. Right. And I remember cutting left. And when I saw your name and I saw you there, I was like, that's, I did feel that warmth, because I remember your name, because it's obviously quite a recognizable name, alongside all these other guys who were at Marvel, and I remembered it from the Marvel age, and I remember seeing it in the books that you worked on, and I just remember, wow, there's someone, and I felt a connect, even though I probably didn't know much about you outside of that experience and interaction through the comic book, which wasn't really an interaction. I guess it was.
It is.
It's a very kind of anonymous interaction, but still. And it's fascinating. And you were so lovely, when we came up and spoke to you. So thank you for that, because it's quite a nerve-wracking thing going to a con that size and, meeting someone who is quite, remembered from that period and from those books. So
it is an interesting shorthand, because people do feel like they know me, and that's great, because then it makes them come up and talk to me, and then I get to know them. So
yeah.
It is kind of a shorthand that they already know something about me before they ever come up and talk to me.
Yeah.
But I look at conventions like that all over the world that way, is that our pop culture that we share in this industry, is a shorthand for all of us. Anyone that walks into that room and has a love of comics already has something in common with other people in that room. So it's an immediate connection. And I always like to think, no matter what country I'm in, no matter what language they speak, that there are friends in that room. I just haven't met them yet.
Yeah.
And we're all starting with that commonality.
Yeah.
And I love that about our, comic book community.
Yeah.
It's so funny, because So Ian told me about the experience. I wasn't able to jump on a plane and come see him in Boston because, I live in North Carolina. He lives over there. We do this show every week. Been doing it for years now. And he told me, and I was like before he mentioned who you were, I was kind of like, wait, I know that name. I know that name because it rang a bell. And I was like, oh my God, the cards, the editor, the collector cards.
Yeah.
And I was dying because I was like, yeah. And I was cracking up because I was thinking about Craig. I was thinking about you because, I'm that kind of crazy with collecting trading cards for Surfer. And, and I knew you from the books too. And I was just like, this is such a crazy world we live in. Isn't to it? See how it's just insane. I mean, I remember I was born in 85. I grew up around the time you were coloring Surfer. Like I was, reading Surfer books and doing all this other stuff. And, Surfer had a profound effect on me as a kid. I grew up very differently. My sister has severe autism and, I grew up very differently from other people. Like, you know what I mean? Like it was very much caring for her. I was around other kids with disabilities and all that kind of stuff. And Surfer always had this sense of peace that he was trying to find that was difficult to obtain. He didn't understand why the world was so ugly and he couldn't understand that. And I remember reading those books and I was like, wow, okay, this feels like a character I'm connected to. And it's such a weird thing. You mentioned earlier how all these characters deal with real world problems, even though they're fantastic. Sure. And it was this kind of interesting thing with Surfer where there were still some bases of realism and bases of understanding from like a universal kind of empathetic type of understanding of him. But it's so funny how the cards reminded me of that. And I looked back at the cards like, oh my God, there she is. And I wanted to ask you because it's just so crazy how like that connection to that card to me is now I'm getting to hear all these wonderful stories and mean how wonderful you are and all this kind of fun stuff. I was looking at the card and it's like a teleportation card. Is that correct? I know we're going to have it in the tasting notes, everybody, in case you don't collect these cards, which I suggest you do because they're fantastic.
I'm going to bring it.
It's a little segment of time. Yes.
A little segment of time. It's so charming. Were these, so tell us the history of these cards. So did they come out and were they given out conventions or like, what is the history of these cards? I love that image. So
I know the John Byrne one. Yeah, that's really cool.
It's so cool.
So let's just
if it were in color, you would see that She-Hulk that is in there.
Let's just pause slightly. John Byrne has drawn you, so straight away.
How cool is that?
I mean, massive respect on that.
John. And see, this is She-Hulk that I'm holding up, and this is supposed to be her shadow down here.
Yeah, I see the hair. I see it now.
Hair.
Okay.
That's so funny.
Yeah, but John drew me as a character in the book quite often. So this was not the first time that he drew me. He drew me in the comic book and pretty well mimicked my wardrobe that I used to wear to work all the time, cowboy boots, dresses, and Chinese dresses. And I mean, I still do. I mean, I love to wear different textiles and different clothes, but he had it down. He had me dressed accurately. The only thing that wasn't so accurate, and I've mentioned this before in interviews, is that he gave me this big palatial office that was a penthouse on the corner with these big windows and people bringing me coffee in the morning on a silver tray. Actually, in the comic book, I think it was like some really good looking shirtless guy, but it was, that did not happen, guys. I'm just telling you, there was no bodybuilder bringing me coffee on a tray.
You have that air about you.
My illusion.
I know it should have been that way, but it just wasn't.
John Byrne's like, she just has that thing about her that someone should be serving her coffee without their shirt. I don't know. It just makes sense to me,
Oh no! Don't put any ideas out there. At the next convention, people are going to be bringing me coffee, and they're going to be shirtless.
I was going to say, if I did that, you wouldn't want to drink anything. You'd probably.
But they can bring me coffee.
They can bring you
coffee.
So coffee, yes. Clothes are not optional.
How do you take your coffee? Perfect. Let's put this out here so that people get it right, because I don't want anyone making any tea mistakes. How do you take your coffee?
Yes, I know. But from my experience working with British directors, I know it's very hard for anyone to understand just how much coffee you need or how much sugar you need. So I actually just ask for it black because what I'm really wanting is that jolt of caffeine to immediately enter my system.
Okay.
But if I were making it for myself, I would put in 1 sugar and a splash of milk.
Okay.
But how
That's
do you
a secret,
define
ladies and
a
gentlemen.
splash of milk?
Well, as an English person, I know exactly what a splash of milk would be, but it is quite a difficult thing.
It is to explain to someone that doesn't have a clue.
Very much is. I've learned. My wife is vegetarian, so the only time she has milk is when she has it in tea or coffee. And if I give a micro milliliter more than it should be, she knows. So yes, believe me, I'm very well trained in a splash.
I can't drink this.
Yeah.
What is this? How dare you,
sir? My head and then duck out of the way.
Ian's really good at ducking now.
No, seriously.
Let me tell you what my office was really like at Marvel real quick before we move on.
Please.
So, yes, I did not have the corner penthouse office. I shared an office with Marie Javens, and we were down in a segment called The Dungeon. It was on a completely different floor than the rest of Marvel. The people in the dungeon are the ones that called it the dungeon. No one else, I think, even knew we were there. You had to go down a long hall, down an elevator, down another long hall, down some stairs to get to us from the other Marvel offices. There were no windows, and there were 3 offices down there, and we had our own copy machine down there, so we didn't have to constantly go to the other floor. And no one from the rest of Marvel ever came down there. And conversely, because of that, we had our own little kingdom down there. Marie and I even had a pet rat for a while, whose name was Cleo.
Oh my goodness.
And it was not a wild rat. We didn't just take one off the floor and say, "Hey, pet rat." No, it was a domesticated rat. Although there were plenty of wild ones.
Yeah,
around.
not the New York ones. You don't want to be.
We're not those type of rat people. Okay, we're very different.
No, we're not. Yeah. The wild ones can stay wild, but this one was a Japanese hooded rat, and which means it was brown and white, and we had it in a cage in the office. We'd let it loose, and it would run around on the desks and stuff. And no one knew we had a rat down there because no one ever came to our office, ever. So
you had all that sweet real estate to yourself. That's great.
Yeah, it was great. If only there had been a window. I think we should have just painted a big window on the wall.
Well, it's interesting. These Marvel editor cards. So for people who don't know what these were pimped from issue 104 of Marvel Age, which is the Jim Lee. It kind of it's a big profile on Jim Lee around the time that X-Men was launching, and there was a whole double page about them. I'll take some photos of these and put them on the tasting notes.
Yeah, they're really fun.
So these are the initial ones that were done. Wow. And you'll notice you're not on this page. No. So on this page, we had people like Tom DeFalco, Mark Grunwald, Jim Salicrup, Craig Anderson, who's pictured on a surfer board. Is that the one you've got, Noreen? Have you got that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Craig is such a nice man. I really enjoyed working with him.
We got Carl Potts, Ralph Macchio, Bob Harris, Fabian. I can never pronounce his surname.
Give it a shot.
Fabian Nicchizia?
No, not even close.
Oh God, I want to
dagger in the heart.
Can we do that to Ian all day? That's amazing. No, not even close. How dare you?
No, it's Fabian Nicieza.
Nicieza, great. Yeah, okay, Nicieza. Let's never have him on the podcast because I will probably insult him.
He's awesome. You should have him on.
Oh no, we'd love to. A lot of these cats we'd love to speak to.
For sure.
Who else is on this page? Mike Rockwitz, Don Daly, Nell Yontov. That's a slightly disturbing image. Danny Fingeroff, Terry Kavanagh, and then you appear. And then they were published every issue. So issue 106, there you are on the back page, still more Marvel editors cards. And you've got yourself with Marie, you've got Rob Tokar, Glenn Herdling, and Mark McLaurin.
Yeah, all my buddies.
Back page all to yourself. So were these
Why did they put us in a different issue?
Well, no, they carried on doing it. So 107 had, and for those watching at home, these will be on the show.
Steve Saffel that did this?
Yeah, I think it was. No, Steve Saffel himself appears in 107. So you were in an issue earlier than him. Issue 107 had Tammy Brown, Steve Saffel, Sven Larson, and Lou Bank.
Yeah, all my
So
buddies.
there we are. So it was the second to last page in each book. And then I think it ran through to about issue 109. I think this is the last one. We've got Pat Garrahay, Tom Danning, Barry Dutter, and Dawn Geiger. And that one is an exceptionally 90s.
Which one is?
I love that.
Oh, wow. Look at that. Yeah.
Look at that. It's brilliant.
Yeah. We were able to pick the people that we wanted to do our cards. So,
that's wonderful.
of course, I was working with John at the time. So I asked him to do my card. And I still have the original.
Oh
no! Don't say that. That's cool.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I mean,
is the original in color?
No.
Oh, that's cool.
No, I guess something is a little bit lost because you may not realize that She-Hulk that I'm.
Yeah. I love it now. Like seeing the shadow of the hair and no, I love it now.
Yeah,
I absolutely adore it.
Oh, good.
I love it. It's amazing.
And you got to know I was editing She-Hulk at the time, and John was the She-Hulk artist, so you could put two and two together and maybe guess that was She-Hulk.
Yeah. Oh no, you can totally see it.
Yeah,
I loved it. Yeah, no, it's great.
I mean, I'm not lucky enough to own any of them because they are rare as hen's teeth to find because I believe they were issued. Yeah, I believe they were only issued for cons, so they're only given out at cons.
Yes, we only gave them out at conventions.
Yeah. And I think different creators gave them out at different rates. So there's some of them and there's a lot out there that are unsigned. I mean, if you can find them signed, and I think they did them subsequent years with slightly different designs that would fit with the Marvel cards that were coming out. Right around that time. So yeah, I mean, they are. There's one guy that we know who's got a fair chunk of them. He's managed to track them down. But even
aren't there 3 sets or just 2 sets?
I think there's 2 or 3 that I've seen.
There's one with a purple border, which I think Stanley is part of in '92.
Yeah,
I think he's in that. And then there's the one with the gold one, which you're in. And I think there's the one.
I was in the purple one too, I think.
Really? Wow.
Yes. Yeah. Because I know John Byrne drew me. And then Michael Golden did one.
Oh, wow.
With me and the Impossible Man.
Oh, that's cool. I got to find that.
Cowboy boots. And then Mike Zeck drew me as well.
Oh, wow.
But that's the image. The Mike Zeck one is the one I use on the Witterstaetter witticisms.
Gotcha.
He's the artist that drew that picture of me.
Okay.
So maybe I was only on 2 cards.
Well, who knows? The only one that we've been able to find an image of is the one that was printed in Marvel Age. It may well be that they put more in issues because, as I said, I don't have all of the issues in Marvel Age. I keep missing massive chunks here and there. So maybe they're out there. So, folks, if you've got them, send us images of them because it'd be nice to get rid of the database.
Eventually, I've got some at home.
Yeah. But wow. Okay. What a marvelous time. Sorry, I can't believe I made that pun.
Marvelous.
That was good.
That was good.
That was good.
I took a run up. I took a mental run up to that. I want to after Marvel, you went to Topps, and I loved the X-Files comics that came out from Topps. And I think I've still got reacquired a full run of them. Those covers and those first issues were so hot at the time. I remember them being like instant sellouts because you go back to the 90s. I don't think people appreciate how popular the X-Files was.
Oh, it was wildly popular.
It was like properly, I mean, in an age before streaming and binge watching box
or Ancient Aliens, there was X-Files.
Yeah we loved it. So after Top, so I want to fast forward slightly. I want to talk about the kind of stuff that you do now because you mentioned
we're just going to gloss all over Tops. We're not going to talk about Tops.
No. We can dwell on Tops. It's just that I'm not as familiar with it. If you want to go Tops, you go Tops. But what I was going to say was because I know you went into you mentioned yourself you did you move out west and get into kind of film and TV?
Okay, I'll give you the truncated history, and then you can come back.
Yes.
And ask any questions that you feel are necessary. Okay. So I left Marvel and I went to Topps.
Yes.
Very hard decision. Jim Salicrup was over there as the editor-in-chief at that point. He offered me a job, which was far more than what I was making at Marvel. But I was very happy at Marvel. But at Marvel had recently been bought by Ron Perlman of Revlon. So things were starting to change. It was starting to become a bit more corporate. And I went to Mark Grunwald and I told him that I had this job offer from Topps and I was trying to decide what to do. And he was very honest with me. And he said, look, things are changing around here and I don't know what's going to happen. And I really feel like they're going to start firing people. And I don't know how many people I'm going to be able to save. So he already knew something.
Yeah.
And I said, well, thanks for the heads up. And I took the job at Topps. And a few months after that, heads rolled at Marvel. It was a huge bloodbath. I don't know if you remember that.
We're very
And they fired tons of people, including my former boss, Craig Anderson, who was such a dedicated editor. I mean, that was just an incredible shame. He was the Silver Surfer editor and Guardians of the Galaxy editor, really loved Marvel. I don't know if you know this, but Craig was also the son of the creator of Marmaduke.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Okay.
his father was also an artist and a writer.
Gotcha.
So I went over to Topps and immediately just jumped right in with the media books. I suggested that we get Jurassic Park, which we did, which was really cool because when I was at Marvel, I had read Jurassic, and I think Salicrup was already on that before I got there. But when I was at Marvel, I read the first Jurassic Park book, and I said, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing! I want to do a comic book of this." And I went to some of my bosses and said, not Grunwald, and said, hey, can we try to get the rights to this and do a comic book adaptation? And I remember distinctly one of them said, well, we don't really need that. We've already got Devil Dinosaur. So we've already got a dinosaur book.
Okay.
Or a dinosaur character. I'm like, it's like, what? So one of the draws for me to go to Topps was that Salicrup was already, I think, trying to get Jurassic Park, and he told me I could be the editor.
Oh, wow.
And I do quite love dinosaurs.
Yeah, who doesn't?
So that was quite a bone
That's
to
awesome.
throw at me, as you will.
Boom.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes.
That's good.
Big Tyrannosaurus Rex bone. And then I also started working on Hercules and Xena and
Yes.
X-Files. And I forget, Zorro. I did the movie adaptation of Zorro.
Oh,
which
that
was
first
really
movie
fun
was so
because-
good.
Yeah, I had Anthony Hopkins in that book, and later on I worked with Anthony Hopkins on a movie, but that's a story for later. And
Hannibal.
also worked with
Red Dragon.
Antonio
Red
Banderas.
Dragon. That's it.
Yes, Red Dragon. Yes. And Anthony Hopkins was such a hoot to work with. I truly adore that man. And so I worked on Zorro. I worked on other media tie-ins like Lone Ranger. I got to talk to Clayton Moore, and then we worked on Dracula versus Zorro. We did the Dracula movie adaptation, but we won't talk about that.
Is that the Gary Oldman, Keanu Reeves?
Yeah, I mean, it's no. Oh, Dracula was great. I was thinking Frankenstein. We also did the Frankenstein adaptation.
Oh, the Kenneth Branagh one.
Yes.
Oh, the Robert De Niro.
I haven't seen that one.
Kenneth Branagh, Robert De Niro.
Yeah. Robert De Niro is Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that. That's crazy.
Oh my God.
I love
you've
that
got to check it
Dracula
out.
Bram Stoker.
You've got to check
I'm going
it
to watch
out.
it.
Yeah.
I'm going to check it out. Yeah, no.
It's got some very lovely visuals.
Yeah.
I'm going to watch it. I love all this stuff, man. Universal monster movies. I'm in it, man. I'm
And
ready.
I love Gary Oldman as Dracula. I thought he
so
was
good
sexy and sexy at the same time.
Gary
No, he
Oldman
was
could
great.
read
I
the
was
phone
in it.
book
I
on
remember
there.
my father and I, my dad showed me that movie on Laserdisc when I was a kid. And I loved Bram Stoker Dracula. I know people talk whatever, but I think it's a great movie. I think it's a
I love it.
killer
loved
movie.
it.
Yeah.
I liked it.
I
liked it a
love
lot.
Gary Oldman in anything. He's
Yeah.
All day.
He could fold laundry and make it interesting.
I'd watch.
I would. It's like, oh my gosh, look at that technique.
The man's focused.
And now we're going
He
to
made
go
me totally
live.
forget he's just acting and not really folding laundry.
We're going to go live to the secret camera we have in Gary Oldman's utility room, and we're going to watch it. That would be creepy. Let's not do that.
I think we should start a series of interviews with people in like their laundry rooms or something. No,
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
People
There's
have
a
done
good
it.
idea.
People have done it.
I'm
Well,
kidding.
James Corden goes and drives people around and interviews them.
And we could call it In the Watch.
What are we doing? We are on fire today.
Right.
Okay.
Let's edit this bit out.
I will
While-
save that idea for
we'll
later.
save that because I don't want
Let's
anyone
save
go.
that.
Let's
I don't
go
want to
and get
give
the
all these good
URL.
ideas away to the whole world. We need to
No,
save
no.
those for
No,
ourselves.
We'll work on
gotta-
copyright. We'll do the whole thing.
Yeah.
We'll do it right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
Okay. So in the
And we
morning.
get yeah, seriously, edit that out. We'll use it later. I have all kinds of good ideas. So yeah, I did. So I did all those books over at Tops, and one of the books I did there too was my creator on book Spark Next with Michael Golden, and we started that at Tops, and then later when I left Tops, I reprinted it through Image as a packager because it was still my image to package it. So it did appear in print twice. And actually now Michael and I are working on the trade paperback to finish it because the last issue was never done. So that's something fans can look forward to in the next year or so. So I was at Tops. I'm trying to make this quick. I was at Tops.
No, you go as long as you need.
Yeah. And there started to be another implosion in comic books around that time. And you could sort of see the writing on the wall with comics that a lot of comic shops were going out of business. They were publishers were oversaturated. Oh my goodness. Sorry.
That's okay. You're popular.
Publishers were oversaturating. And comic stores were buying too much. I mean, it was a big issue. I don't know if you remember all that, but stores started to go out of business. And Topps was deciding that they did not want to stay in the comic book business. Around that same time, I went to Canada on a ski trip. I was in Banff, and it was the last run of the day. That's when it always happens. But I was on a ski lift with someone that was not a good skier. They'd never skied before. And we're getting off the ski lift, and she tripped me with her skis. And I slid down the slope, and I'm laying there, and I'm looking at my legs, and I'm going, my legs are not supposed to go in that direction. And felt no pain per se, but I looked like Gumby. And and I still tried to stand up and still tried to walk, and I couldn't stand up because I had severed my kneecap. So my kneecap was floating in the middle of my thigh.
Nope.
And that's all the detail I'll give there. But I had to go to the hospital in Canada. I had to put my leg in a cast and get back to New York. And everything at Topps was kind of falling apart. I'm in a cast. I'm sitting in my little New York apartment, and I get a phone call. It's amazing how things happen. But I get a phone call from this gentleman named Joel Goss, who lives in Los Angeles. I had met him through some of my convention friends before, and he was friends with Eleanor Keaton, who was Buster Keaton's widow.
Yes.
Yeah, and who was a huge, and still am, a huge Buster Keaton fan. But so is Jackie Chan. And you can look at Jackie's movies, especially Project A, some of the other movies, and you can see the heavy Buster influence. And he also recreates a lot of Buster Keaton stunts. And so Joel called me and he said, hey, Jackie's filming Rush Hour. And of course, I already knew Jackie because we were working on Spark Next.
Sure. And
he said, hey, Jackie's in Los Angeles. He's filming Rush Hour. Eleanor would really like to meet him. Do you think you could set that up? And I said, I think Jackie would really like that. So I contacted him. I said, Eleanor wants to meet you. He said, great. So within a day or two, I was on a plane, cast and all, crutches and all, flying to LA. And probably within a day, I was on the set of Rush Hour and, hobbling around on my crutches, to introduce Jackie and Eleanor. And that was so funny because Jackie immediately comes up to me and he goes, what happened to you? I said, well, I had a skiing accident, and I told him about it. And he just shakes his head and he goes, and they say what I do is dangerous.
Wonderful.
And then he proceeded to steal my crutches every chance he got So I had no crutches and like use them to focus the camera. And oh, he's hilarious.
That's amazing.
Like, Jackie, give me my crutches back. Yeah, he's really funny. I love Jackie. I always remember, and I've told this before too. I mean, there's so many stories about him. I'll put them in a book at some point. But when I was going to Hong Kong all the time, before the changeover, I've only been there a few times since, but I would go over there and work on the book, hang out on movie sets. Jackie would always grab me and throw me in as an extra. So if you look close, you can see me in a lot of Jackie Chan movies, especially crime stories.
As if
I have a very pivotal I have a very pivotal role in a crime story.
Oh my God, yes.
This is a perfect, as if you ever needed one, excuse to go and sit down and do some Jackie Chan back catalogue. It's been way too long since I've seen any. And my daughter's never seen any.
So many good ones.
Yeah, so many great movies. But he would always tell these great jokes in Cantonese, and then he would translate them for me. So one time I was there and I said, okay, Jackie, I'm going to go back to New York and I'm going to start taking Cantonese lessons so I can understand the jokes when you tell them. He goes, okay, fine. So I went back to New York, started taking Cantonese lessons, very rudimentary, like, Chiso Haibindo, where's the bathroom? Just very rudimentary stuff. Nosik Gong Guangdong Gua, I speak Cantonese. Yeah, I speak that sentence. So it's like very rudimentary stuff. And because Cantonese is very difficult, depending on where your inflection is, you can be saying dog or the number 9 or something you don't want to say. So it's like gal, gal. Totally different words. So it's like very difficult. But I enjoyed trying, and I still remember a little bit of it. But I went back to Hong Kong and I said, okay, Jackie, you got to be careful now because I know some Cantonese. And he just like looks at me and punches me in the shoulder and says, I'll just speak Mandarin now. Oh, Jackie got me again.
I zig, you zag.
Yeah.
Love it.
Oh, there's some hilarious stories from Rush Hour 2 because I did work on Rush Hour 2. I'll just jump there really quick. On Rush Hour 2, I was a production assistant, but I was really in charge of first team, which means I was in charge of Jackie and Chris. That's cool. Brett Ratner was the director on that. And Jackie, the Lakers were in playoffs. So Chris was always late getting to set. When the director would call, Jackie would go to set. He'd be sitting there like, where's Chris? And we'd wait for Chris. And Chris would eventually show up because the Lakers would have like done something or the game was over. And so Jackie said, look, Renee, I'm tired of sitting on set. Here's what we're going to do. I want you to stake out Chris's trailer. And when he starts to walk, I want you to come and get me, and I will still get to set before him. And I said, okay, Jackie, yeah, let's give it a shot. So that happened. Brett called for the actors to come to set. I went there and I was like staking out Chris's trailer, waiting for him to walk. He came out. I zigzagged, ran to Jackie's trailer. Jackie, he's walking. Jackie like ran out the door like the Flash, man. And goes back through the back, zigzagging through the trailers, back through the back door of the set, gets to his seat, sits down like this. Chris walks in. He's going, Chris, what took you so long?
What a trip.
I know. So anyway, from when I went to the set of Rush Hour with the whole crutches and the focusing of the camera, I was not at Tops anymore. I had enrolled in NYU Film School. And I met so many people on that trip, and they said, look, why don't you just come to LA and learn on the job? You can start getting work immediately. And that's what I did. I packed up my bag and I moved to Beverly and started working on movies and commercials and music videos immediately. Cool. And did that nonstop nonstop for about 5 years.
Wow.
And I mean, when I say nonstop, I mean like very few days in between productions. So you're working on a movie for 6 months, that becomes your family. Those are the people you know. And then that movie ends and it's like this separation anxiety. It's like, oh my God, where's my family? And then you start your next production and they become your family. It's very much, once again, kind of a carnival.
Yeah.
You're moving from job to job and hopefully you're networking and some of those people are the same, but you work very long hours. You work, sometimes 18-hour days and sleep 4 hours at night and get up and do it all over again. Yeah. It's not glamorous. I mean, it is very rewarding to see the product when it's done and know you had a part of it. And just like working at Marvel, you're working really hard, you're multitasking, but you're having a great time doing it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what film production was as well. It was very hard work, but I had a great time. But then around, when was it? I worked in film production for about 5-6 years, and I was completely out of comics. I was still running my little publishing company, Eva Ink Publishing, and I was doing Zorro books and some other books. And art portfolios. But otherwise, I was not doing shows. I was not going to conventions. And conventions didn't really exist then like they do now in the plethora of conventions that we have. But one of my friends, Bob Burton, who created the Flaming Carrot and Mystery Men, said, hey, I'm going to be... Yeah. He said, I'm going to be in San Diego. And he often stayed on my houseboat in LA when he came because... he'd call me and say, can I stay on your houseboat? And I say, yes. So he was going to San Diego and he said, why don't you come with me? And I said, okay. So I went to San Diego and it happened that one of his friends that was going to be there too was Arthur Sudam.
Yes.
And I met Arthur there and we became friends. And he said, I'm looking for an agent. Would you consider being my agent? And wow. I said, yeah, I could do that. And that turned into a full-time job because, of course, Arthur is brilliant. And once we started going out and pitching him for work, the work started piling in. And one of the projects that he started was Marvel Zombies.
Yes. Yeah, baby.
Took off and was really, I think this is verifiable that the success of that series is what got The Walking Dead on TV because Marvel Zombies was so successful.
Yeah.
And I think it's by virtue, in large part because of Arthur's covers, because he did every one of those covers was a gem, and he did multiple variants on multiple books. I lost track of how many books he did.
I got my Headless Surfer. I mean, it's an amazing. I remember that whole run. It was awesome.
I know. Every book, like we looked for a little bit of humor to put in there, sort of like an Easter egg for the fans.
No, you did great. I mean, it reminded me of Creepy. Like it reminded me of the old, it reminded me of the good stuff. Yeah, it was awesome.
Right. And Arthur was really, and sometimes still is, one of the only ones that, his style is so unique. But even with Charlie and Flytrap and Mudwogs, he was one of the first artists to bring sort of fine art painting along with Richard Corbin, into comic books. So, and now he's known not only for Marvel Zombies, but, some Walking Dead work, very, his run on Deadpool is what the Deadpool movies are based on. Great deceased covers. I mean, there's just he has just not stopped working in the last 20 years. He's like, if you look at how many covers he has done, it's amazing. So I started out repping Arthur, and then some of my other friends from the industry said, hey, well, why don't you rep me too? One of those was Michael Golden, who was the artist that I hired to do all my covers when I was an editor at Marvel and Topps. And, there's just a long list of people that I've worked with since and still continue to work with. Mike Zeck, just amazing creative people. Jim Shooter is my client. I booked Jim into shows. Okay. If you haven't had him on your show yet, you should, because he's a great interview.
We've got a list of people we'd love to talk to that's as long as long
so it's like it became so much that pretty much my life became consumed with being an agent, and comics pulled me back in.
Gotcha.
Pull me back.
And I don't regret it because it's been a heck of a lot of fun, and I've been able to travel the world and curate art shows around the world and work with people that I truly admire. And I mean, it's been a whirlwind. I look back on it and go, oh my gosh, it's just like the places we've been able to go and the fans we've been able to meet and the projects we've been able to work on. I mean, I feel incredibly blessed and incredibly lucky.
Yeah.
To have been pulled back in, really.
I find it fascinating that journey. That's kind of, I'm glad you put that connecting tissue in there. So thank you for that. I'm fascinated by what you do now and the fact that it takes you to all those different places and the fact that you get to work with and represent all those artists. We obviously
I'm repping actors now too, and voice actors.
Yes, you mentioned.
I rep a lot of the people from Aliens, including Mark Ralston, Rico Ross, Cynthia Scott, Daniel Cash.
I love those.
Hope.
I love those actors.
So those are all my guys. William Hope actually lives in the UK.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. You'll know, of course, that Upper Deck, who do the Marvel trading cards now, they've had the license since 2012, I want to say. They did an Aliens set, and of course, it was all sticker autos. But I've been fortunate enough to collect quite a few of those. So
good.
And even though the actors didn't actually physically sign the card, that's a cherished thing for me because
they're all such nice guys.
Yeah, they come across.
So cool.
I went on a bit of a journey with Aliens last year of rediscovering it and going and watching loads of YouTube footage where they've been at cons or where they've been on podcasts, because there's a whole long running podcast based out of the UK that talks about the whole alien universe. They talk to people from the games, they talk to people from the Alien Predator movies, and they've had quite a lot of the guys on from the kind of the Sulaco brigade, as I call them. So that's fascinating that you rep those guys as well.
Oh yeah, and voice actors too. Even now I've segued into anime.
Wow!
Nice.
And Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh and Bleach.
At Boston Fan Expo, it's such a melting pot of that pop culture. You had people there from Smallville. You had people there who are anime voice artists. You had Kevin Smith and his crew there. You had Jonathan Frakes from Star Trek Next Generation, who I went off and had my photo with, and that was a proper bucket list moment.
Isn't that great?
For me,
that's so crazy
lovely.
Cool.
He was so lovely.
Shows like that are a big melting pot of pop culture.
Yeah.
They really
it was
are.
great. It was great. It was bizarre. I said this to Norrin last week because that exhibition center, you go down the escalator and you're kind of descending into it. And I was going down that escalator and just watching. I was like, I'm with my people.
Yeah,
these are my people.
That's the way you feel.
Yeah,
it's like they're family. You just don't know them yet, or they're friends, and you just don't know them yet. Because when you walk in that door, you already have a shorthand to communicate with everybody in that room.
It's fascinating. Fantastic. Yeah. So what have you got next on your plate? Because when we spoke at the con, you mentioned an event that you've got coming up in New York that sounds absolutely fascinating. Tell us about that, because this episode will be up with enough time for people to be able to kind of check it out if they're in the hood.
Yes. I mean, that's probably one of the reasons I can't get on a plane and come to London for the Queen's funeral, is because I'm putting together this gallery show. Oh. Plus, you're already going to have like 500,000 people in the streets of London.
It's going to be absolutely crazy. Yeah.
I know, but oh my gosh. But I am putting together a gallery show in Manhattan. It opens October 5th, which is the day before the New York Comic Con. Mm-hmm. So anyone that lives in New York, anyone that is coming in for the show, I hope you will consider coming to this opening. It is going to be at the Francis Tavern Museum.org. Mm-hmm. And Francis is spelled with a U, Fraunces.
This will all be in the show notes for people as well. Yeah.
And Francis Tavern, I'm going to give you a little bit of background. Francis Tavern is the oldest tavern in New York. It pre-exists the Revolutionary War.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes. And everyone dined there from Franklin to Washington to Jefferson to Hamilton and Burr. I mean, Hamilton and Burr were at a party together there 2 weeks before they tried to kill each other, and one of them succeeded.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of place. And after the Revolutionary War, it was where Washington had the farewell dinner with his officers. And, said he was walking away from public life. But of course, they pulled him back in. And the room is still there. The room where it happened is still there. You can walk, you can stand in it, you can look at it. It's just an amazing place. So I have loved that place for a long time, because when I worked at Topps Comics, we were down on Whitehall Street, which is in Lower Manhattan.
Yeah.
And I could go to Fraunces Tavern for lunch. I just hung out in that part of New York because, of course, back in Revolutionary War times, Manhattan was extremely small, and it really just was comprised of Lower Manhattan.
Yeah.
And that building has existed for all these years and is still in operation. You can still eat there. You can go to the museum on the second floor. But I always loved that place. But I started thinking, because about 8 months ago, I started thinking about how George Washington is portrayed in pop culture. And one of my clients, Mark Ralston, also played Judge Shippen in the TV series Turn, as well as being in Aliens and Shawshank Redemption and all those other great movies.
Yeah.
And also, I'm a big fan of Hamilton. I love Hamilton, the musical. I've seen it in London twice. And I actually think the London production is one of the best.
Of course.
I can't wait to see it again there. But I've seen it about 8 times. So I would venture to guess that I'm a big Hamilton fan.
Just a little. Just a little bit.
My nephew, Brennan, took me to that when we were in Chicago for a show one time. And I had no idea what to expect. It's like, Hamilton, sure, why not? And I loved it. I cried at the end of it. I mean, literally tears were, because it was such an emotional experience.
So well made.
And the person playing Hamilton in that production, his last name is Cervantes. He's currently playing Hamilton on Broadway. But the Chicago theater was so intimate, sort of like London theaters, where you feel like you were just right there on the stage with the actors, and you have this very strong connection with them, and you almost feel like they are talking to you because of the way the theaters are set up. Unlike a lot of the Broadway shows where you feel like you're a football field away, in London and in Chicago, you are right there.
Yeah.
And it hits you like a brick at the end. And it's just like it left such a profound impression on me that it planted the seed in my brain. And that's the way a lot of my books start, is I'll see something and I'll say, that's a book. That's an idea. I got to do that. My Nick Cardy, The Artist at War book started that way. When I was at Nick's house in Florida, he started showing me these sketches that he did during World War II. And I was going, Nick, you got to do a book on this. And he's like, well, do you think anyone would want to read it? And I said, look, I want to read it. If I want to read it, other people are going to want to read it. And so we did the book, Nick Cardy, The Artist at War, which was published in the United States, but it was also published by Titan Books in the UK. So, you guys can probably find that book. But that's the way this current project started. And I will get to the point. I started thinking about how George Washington was portrayed in pop culture. And Michael Golden said, well, Batman also has ties to the Revolutionary War. And I go, really? Maybe there's some connection here. And I started researching it, and I found I found 100 appearances of Washington in comic books. I kept researching. I found 500 appearances of Washington in comic books. I kept researching it more, and I am not kidding you. There are probably 1,000 or more appearances of George Washington just in United States comic books. Not even talking about sequential art in the UK and elsewhere, because he was a character in books there too, art, historical sequential art. So I was going, wow, I've got to write a book on this. And so I started to write the book. At the same time, I was asked to be on the arts committee for the Fraunces Tavern Museum. And I said, guys, I'm writing this book. It's like, why don't, do you think I could do a gallery show? like I needed to do more work, and I guess I needed to do more work.
Well, clearly.
And they go, wow, this is an amazing idea. So it's run by the Sons of the American Revolution and in the state of New York. And they said, yes, we would love for you to do it. So then I started putting together a gallery show, and it is almost done. It is almost done. It's like we are going to have tons of rare comic books, starting from the 1920s to the present.
Wow.
We are going to have original art by Michael Golden, Graham Nolan, George Perez, George Evans, great illustrator from the 60s. And also we have some original paintings by Daniel Scott Jr. And one of the focal points of the show is also this wonderful George Washington painting by Arthur Suydam, where he really gives it a pop culture feel, which ties into the whole theme of the show, and uses his fine art painting techniques. And of course, Arthur comes from a long line of New York artists and Hudson River painters. So he already has a very strong tie to New York. But his painting is fantastic. It's called Through His Eyes, and it's going to be one of the focal points of the exhibit. And then we also have Daniel Scott Jr., who's doing an original illustrate. Well, it's a mixed media piece, and I don't know how to explain this to you guys, but it is a portrait of George Washington made with candy wrappers. I kid you not.
Wow.
And it will blow your mind. Both that piece and Arthur's piece will just blow your mind. Daniel actually takes candy wrappers from like Tootsie Pops and other types of candy and cuts them up and uses them as sort of a mosaic to make this piece.
Yeah.
And we are going to have a video of the piece from start to finish, a sped up video, so you can see the creation.
Oh, love it. Love it.
That's
and
so
you're also
cool.
going to have VR sets, virtual reality sets at the opening on October 5th, so you can actually go into a virtual incarnation of this gallery and see even additional material. So the opening, here's the name of the exhibit is George Washington. Let me start over. Cloaked Crusader, George Washington in comics and pop culture.
Ah, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's going to be really cool. Basically what we do is we're going through just what pop culture is, sort of what we've been discussing in this interview so far, this melting pot of different things that all come together to give us this shorthand that helps us, that makes us feel like we know people. It's like the pop culture of George Washington started even when he was still alive. If you put a painting of George Washington on your tavern sign, that conveyed so much to people that were just walking down the street and would see your tavern sign. His image has been used as a shorthand and a metaphor ever since to convey an idea or a story or a metaphor, as a shorthand for what people are trying to tell in that story. So the comic book representations of him started out as historical events. Wow. And so you would see sequential art in comics, Classics Illustrated and other books that would just talk about historical events. And then it segued into that wasn't good enough. Let's bring George Washington to the present. Let's go back in time and pluck him from 1778 or whatever and bring him to 1945 so he can help us with this problem. And those stories are really funny because you have characters like Kid Eternity bringing Washington to the present. And it's not like the older Washington that you see on the dollar bill. It's like this buff and really in shape George with this, sleeves rolled up, and he's punching out gangsters in the 1940s. So it's like those are hilarious. And it's like, yeah, George was really cool. And then you go to those wonderful DC time travel stories. And they were constantly popping back in time. Superboy, Supergirl, Bizarro, Crypto. Superman went back in time in Superman 48 to win an autograph contest for a little kid that was in the hospital. And one of the autographs he got was George Washington's autograph. It's like, hello, sir.
That's so awesome.
John Hancock. I have your George Washington. So, and it's just like, apparently these superheroes could just dart through time just because they wanted to. They didn't even need a time machine or anything. It's just like, let's super speed back to 1776. And it's like even crypto. Here's the funny thing is most of them had a very distinct desire to help Washington cross the Delaware. So they all go back in time to somehow enable his crossing of the Delaware without him being aware of it. And one of the stories that I thought was really funny was Crypto goes back in time and sees this big iceberg that Washington is about to hit, like it's the Titanic. And he uses his super X-ray eyes or whatever they are to blow the iceberg to smithereens right before Washington is going to hit it and sink. And the British would have won the war, obviously. Well, we were all British back then, but King George would have won the war. So
apparently so.
And I would have been a British subject and had a British accent.
Now we're back to royalty.
Yeah. So, I love all things British anyway. So I feel like I'm still part British anyway. So, anyway, so there are all these time travel stories where they're just jotting back through time. And those are really fun to look at. And then we do a little segment on Batman and his ties to the Revolutionary War, and even how people like Graham Nolan used a lot of uniforms from that era in Hawk World. And we also segue into Marvel's first appearances of George Washington, which they were kind of slow on the uptake. DC was on this a lot sooner than they were. Wow. George just was in flashbacks, mostly in books like Blonde Phantom #1, which was written by Stan Lee. And that was probably the first appearance of Washington in Marvel Comics, but it was a flashback. And then he later on appeared in Fantastic Four and, some of the other Marvel books. I think the Human Torch and Johnny Storm go back in time to break Washington out of jail. It's this, and there's like, well, you must tell me, where you guys are from and how did this, it's like, why is your dress so strange? Or, whatever. Well, General Washington, we really feel it's best that we not tell you any more than you need to know. It's just like, so George goes through the rest of his life wondering who this man is that can turn into flame. But it's and never tells any of the rest of us about it. But, you have time travel stories in Star Trek.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that episode that issue. I call it an episode because I'm a huge Star Trek fan.
Same.
That issue is Star Trek #9. Yeah, I don't geek out too much, but when I met William Shatner, I kind of geeked out because he told me I looked pretty. I'm sorry. I just melted.
That was it. That's all I needed.
Melted like an ice cube. I'm like, well, thank you, William Shatner. Because he was a part of my childhood. Yeah, I write about that on my blog. There's, I wrote a post when Leonard Nimoy passed away, which you can find it on my blog. And of course, I met Nichelle Nichols too one time, and she was just lovely. So that was a big part of my childhood. Just like you're talking about meeting these people that were part of your childhood, there is something very special about that.
Huge. Yeah.
But Star Trek #9 is a great time travel story. It's not a time travel story. No, it is not a time travel story. It is a completely different type of story featuring George Washington, but also Abraham Lincoln and Napoleon. So you can find that.
I have to check it out.
Yeah, that was really cool. And then we also, even Archie comics travel back in time to interact with Washington. So you have Archie and Jughead going back in time, but they have no superpowers, you say. So how could this be possible? Most of the time it happened by Archie doing something stupid like getting hit on the head. And then all of a sudden he wakes up in 1776.
Classic.
It happens.
And I'm not sure he really does too much except be a witness to history. I have to read more of those stories, but they're still very charming. And you have Archie standing around a lot going, oh, gee whiz. There's George Washington.
An in-depth analysis.
Yeah, I know. And he gets hit on the head once and goes back in time, I think in Archie number 36 from the 1940s. And he has to write a paper for his history class. Miss Grundy's like, makes him go to the library and he gets hit on the head by a bust of somebody. And he wakes up and is somehow interacting with Teddy Roosevelt and Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. And they're like, well, Archie, do you think you can go back and write that paper now? And yeah, guys, thank you so much. And it's just, but they're very charming. So you have all of these really fun stories and beautiful artwork by people over 100 years of books.
Wow.
And we do a little segment on the bicentennial too, because of course in the United States, there was a bicentennial fever that took over.
Yeah.
And it was just, there was bicentennial everywhere. And a lot of people don't also remember, but the night, of course, we weren't alive, but the 1939 World's Fair in New York was also very Washington centric.
Oh, interesting.
Wow.
Because it was the 150th anniversary of his inauguration, and the King and Queen of England came over for that. So, you know, it's just like he's been a part of our pop culture for a long time. I even have a segment for my friends in the UK. I have a segment on how George Washington was portrayed in English publications. And I have some original art from Look and Learn magazine and some other books that were published in the UK.
Cool.
And there's a whole wall on George Washington in the United Kingdom in sequential art.
Oh, wow.
And I also talk about the close connection between our two countries. How even though, you know, during the Revolutionary War, we were one group of British subjects fighting another group of British subjects, we have this commonality and this thread that has connected us through all these years. And we are still very much two sides of the same coin. And one of the things that connects us in a very strong way is our shared pop culture. And these ideals that we have taken with us down through the years. So I do talk about that special connection between our countries. And I love the exhibit. I think it's a lot of fun. On October 5th, we are going to have an opening from 6 to 8 at the tavern. There is a small admission, but with the admission that benefits this historic museum, you have an open bar, you have hors d'oeuvres, you get a free signed print by either Michael Golden or Arthur Saddam. We're having a silent auction, and Jim Shooter is going to be there.
Oh, cool.
And also Arthur Saddam and Michael Golden. And Jim Shooter will be giving the opening remarks.
Wow.
So that will open up the whole thing. And just go to the website, sign up for the event. If you're so inclined, we are also having a fundraising dinner from 8 to 10, which is a different price, but that price also includes the opening. And you also get an additional signed print. You get a goodie bag with a signed comic book in it. And you know, just all kinds of fun stuff. I may even ask some trivia questions. You never know.
Wow.
I really love
it.
You had me at open bar. Quite
trivia questions.
Yeah, at open bar, I was kind of there. I'll be booking my ticket now. So where? So it starts from 5th. How long is it running for? Because 5th October.
Well, it's going to run at least for 2 years because it's the lead up for the 250th anniversary.
Gotcha.
But of the United States. But of course, the opening night to get all this free and not free, but value for your money.
All this great stuff.
Is October 5th.
Cool.
Okay.
And I will be there, and you can talk to me as well. And
there's no other reason.
That'd be awesome.
I can tell more stories.
So Norrin's going to be in town.
I love it.
Norrin will be.
I'm going to be in town. I'm actually going to go to New York Comic Con.
Oh, will you please come to the opening?
I will go. I'm going to check my flight. I don't know if I'm flying in on the 6th or the 5th, but I am 100%. If I'm there, I'm coming. I'm actually really excited. I'm really excited.
Oh, I hope you will. And I will be in Artist Alley at New York Comic Con as well. I'll be at
You'll see me there for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
You'll see me there for sure.
Because are you repping your new employ?
My new gig. Yeah, I'm going to be there with CGC trading cards.
Oh,
so
nice.
we're going to be having our signing with Todd McFarlane for trading cards and comic books. So it'll be really cool to be by him. We're going to do some box openings there. There's actually a bunch of stuff I'm trying to put on for our Marvel card buddies. So hopefully that can happen. But I'm going to be making the rounds. So I will be.
Yeah, Michael Golden has done a lot of trading cards. And, there are Arthur Sadam trading cards out there too.
Oh, yeah. And they're amazing.
Arthur had at least one
sure I'll be
piece.
Seeing them.
You will. Yeah.
Arthur had at least one piece in Upper Deck. Did their first Marvel sets were 2007, 2008. They resurrected Marvel Masterpieces.
Sure.
And most of it was art that had been taken from trading card games at the time. The
Versus system.
Well, Versus Arthur did a lot of Versus cards.
Yes, and
He's
so
amazing.
some of his art. So some of his art and some of Michael's art are in the 07, 08 sets.
Yes.
Because I run I set up 2 groups and one of them focuses on Marvel Masterpieces. So I've got an Instagram where I do a daily masterpiece card, so I feature a different card from any of the 11 sets.
Oh, nice.
Every day, and it's on hiatus at the moment because I just had to take a break because I've been doing it for like 4 years.
You've been doing it for a long time. Yeah.
If you guys ever want to interview Arthur, I'm sure we could get him on.
I would absolutely. That
would be a dream come true.
Love to.
That'd be awesome.
Listen, it's been absolutely delightful to talk to you. We need to wrap up, not least of which because I've got to go and cook dinner for my family.
What are you going to cook?
I'm going to this evening. I'm doing whole wheat fusilli with green pesto, Kalamata olives, and feta cheese crumbled over the top.
And that sounds
absolutely delicious. And our daughter loves it as well, so it's something we can all eat because she's quite fuzzy. And Mummy and Daddy will be having a nice glass of red wine with it. My daughter will probably have.
How nice! How lovely!
So yeah, it's marvelous.
I'm going to have breakfast and more coffee because it's like morning. Well, now it's 11:24 here.
Well, it'd be brunch.
Yeah,
brunch.
So I'm about to go have some lunch with the wife for sure.
Yes, definitely.
But are you
definitely
cooking? No.
No, because I'm not. I'm going to tell you right now. I am lucky she keeps me around. I can be very honest about that. I'm very lucky.
Very nice.
You're very kind. I appreciate it.
Well, you'll be able to talk about foodstuffs when you meet at New York Comic Con.
I'm so excited.
I just don't want it to end, so I keep making excuses.
No, I know. No, nor do I. But I
thank you guys for asking me to be on.
You're very welcome.
Really
you're a gem. Thank
Renee,
you.
Before we obviously don't jump off as soon as we stop the recording because I wanted to ask you something off air. But what's your website? Where can people go to find you online? We'll put the link on the tasting notes, but do feel free to tell people.
Sure. Well, first of all, francistavernmuseum.org. Please go there, sign up for the opening. Remember, Francis has a U in it. Mm-hmm. It's in Lower Manhattan. October 5th is the party. You can reach me personally. I have I have several accounts on Facebook. Eva Inc. Artist Group, Eva Inc. Publishing, Pros and Cons Celebrity Booking, HappySpacePop.com is the website where I have a lot of my celebrities.
Wow.
You can, let's see what else. Eva Inc. Publishing.com, Eva Inc. Artistgroup.com, R. Witterstaetter on Twitter, Eva Inc. Renee on Instagram.
Wow. You're everywhere. This is fabulous.
That's amazing.
If you are a convention promoter and you want to book any of the artists, voice actors, please do reach out to me. We are actively booking 2023 now, and I would love to book some talent and come to a show near you.
Oh, absolutely.
That's awesome.
Especially in the UK. I want to get to the UK.
Yeah. Oh well. Listen, come over, and then I will take you for beers. I was going to say a lot of our listeners will probably be very interested because a lot of them do collect. They collect original art from the sets that we used to make the cards. They collect sketch cards because sketch cards are a huge thing in Marvel cards for these days. These days, I make it sound like a newfangled thing. Sketch cards been around in Marvel cards since '97. And these, I remember when I was a young man, we didn't have sketch cards, and now we have them bloody everywhere. But
bloody everywhere.
Bloody everywhere. But a lot of our listeners will be people who like to commission stuff, so I'm sure they will be checking out the site. And
okay, wonderful.
Looking out for stuff. Renee, thank you so much for making time for us and being so lovely. And I wish you all the best with the George Washington exhibit and opening. And yeah, thank you for all the work you've done at Marvel. And yeah,
thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. And I just want to say that the George Washington exhibit, you have to think of it as a celebration of pop culture too. And the things that unite us and not, instead the things that divide us. So that's my goal with this exhibit. There's something there for everyone.
Yeah, Lord knows all that.
Yeah, it's a little bit of history, a lot of comics, and in even more fun. So, I mean, I do hope that people will come out. And I, once again, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Renee,
thank you so much.
As we mentioned at the top, we always like to ask our guests to sign us off in a particular way, and this is the point where you wish you'd written it down, even though it's only 2 words. So let's see how this is going to go. Renee, how would you like to take our listeners out this week?
Hey guys, everybody listening out here, I have 2 words for you. Enjoy collecting.
Thanks for listening to the Marvel Card Collectors Podcast. Visuals and tasting notes for each episode can be found on our Facebook page. You can subscribe and leave us a voicemail via our home on anchor.fm/MCCP. We're also on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms. Please take a second to subscribe, like, and review our show wherever you get your podcasts. Our podcast can be found by Googling at the MCC Pod, which will also find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. Our Facebook community is at MCCW, Marvel Card Collectors Worldwide, and MMC, Marvel Masterpieces Collectors. The great music we use is called Rocket Power by Kevin MacLeod. Thanks to the collectors, artists, and creators who support the Marvel Cards Fan Collective. We'll see you next time, and remember, it's a small hobby but a fun one. Make mine Marvel and enjoy collecting.